Hey, my name is Doug, and occasionally do these videos to sort of help with this sort of DIY kind of project. And today we're looking at these infinity dome mid-ranges. If you're watching this video, perhaps you have a pair of Quantum Series infinity speakers, and if you do, you'll know that the mid-ranges go bad very easily. They have these little tinsel wires that go to the dome. I've replaced the ones on these right here. This is what I'm going to show you how to do today, and you can see they've all been replaced. But little tinsel wires, they coated them in some kind of wax, and over the years they hardened. And what happens is, as they harden, if you touch them at all, they crack. And when they crack, they always break the little tinsel wire in there too. And so there are very few of these type of mid-ranges that work anymore, and they all need to be repaired. And so I've repaired about 3 sets of Quantum Series Infinities, and I've repaired a ton of these little tinsel wires. And I don't do it the same way maybe everybody does it, and not saying that my way is best necessarily, but my way works really well. And it ends up looking pretty original. The only difference you can see is that it's not attached to the exact same spot there on the dome as the originals were, but sort of the visual look of it is very sort of original, and they end up working really good. So I would love to have gotten a bunch of video footage of the actual repair, but I tried to do that, but it was just so small and fiddly that I couldn't get a good camera angle on it where you could see everything. So what I did is I just took a bunch of pictures of the process, the repair process, and I'm just gonna show you those pictures and talk you through how to do the repair. Before we get started here, I'm just going to show you some of the things you're going to need. The main thing that you may not have that you're going to need is liquid latex. This is the perfect stuff for repairing these mids. It stays soft for a long time, easy to apply, non-toxic, and it's, like I said, it stays really soft. And so you can see that the main problem with the originals is just that they hardened over time and cracked there. So anyway, you can get this stuff on Amazon or wherever. I bought this tub of it, I don't know, 15 years ago. And I've been slowly using it for things, and you'll never run out if you buy a giant tub. Obviously, you don't need a tub this big, but you could get one of these, or you could get a smaller one. But it's really good. You're gonna need a small paintbrush that you're willing to throw away because it will get ruined by this, for applying the latex. I've been using a little clear coat, like a nail polish clear coat, during this. But I think you could also use an oil-based polyurethane. Make sure I'm recording here. Yeah, you could use also, I think, a oil-based polyurethane or a lacquer to do the same thing. But you just want something about this consistency for part of this repair. You're going to want a toothpick, and I swear this is the thing that I end up using the most in this. This is, I don't know why a toothpick works so well, but it works great. A needle. It doesn't have to be a safety pin like this, but some kind of a small needle. You'll need that to loosen up the voice coil from the former. You're going to want, obviously, to get the diaphragm off of the magnet, you're going to need a screwdriver. You're going to want sort of a smaller pair of wire cutters, something that can cut a really small piece of wire. So that's something you're going to want. Some flux, soldering iron, solder. Oh, and I didn't bring it over here, but you're going to want an X-Acto knife as well, or some kind of very small. You could use a straight razor blade if you want, but we're going to be scraping the magnet wire has like an enamel on it that you have to scrape off just a little bit when you're going to solder it. So that's basically what you're going to need. And now I'm just going to get right into the pictures and explaining the process of repairing these mid-ranges. And I think it's worth it because these Infinity series speakers, these Quantum Sphere speakers, are really great. And these mid-ranges, by modern standards, they're not fantastic, but when you're restoring sort of a classic speaker, the goal is to keep it all original as you can, because it's not going to compete with a modern speaker. I mean, it can. It still sounds great, but the more the goal, if you wanted a modern speaker, just buy a modern speaker and don't deal with the finickiness of a classic speaker. But really, it's to just restore it to its original working condition. I think this is one of the best ways to do that. I should also say that I have a bunch of these mid-ranges. As you can see, I've got several pairs of these speakers, and these I just restored for my aunt, so these will be going back to her, but I have a pair of these myself. I also have a pair of Quantum 3s, and I've got a bunch of these dome mid-ranges laying around. And so I happened to have one that was still working, that the tinsels hadn't broken on. And so I measured that one, and then, without changing anything, I swapped in all the ones that I had repaired and measured those. And I'll show that graph now for you, but as you can see, the red trace is the original. All the other traces are the repaired ones. They all measure about the same, so there's not a big difference between them, and so the repair doesn't negatively impact the sound or change the way the speaker operates, and so it still works as intended. Okay, well that's that. We'll get right to the repair. All right, here we are, the first picture. You can see that I've got the diaphragm off of the magnet block. And so you should have already done that. Just take your screwdriver and remove the 4 screws that are holding the plastic sort of mounting bracket and the diaphragm onto the magnet, and it should just pop right off. Do it carefully. While you've got it open, go ahead and take a piece of masking tape and fold it in half and clean out that magnet cap, because there's dirt in there, as you can see from these pictures. Next thing we're going to look at is the actual inside. Actually, I should say also at this point, go ahead and clip those old leads off, and clean up the dome, because it's sort of a dust magnet. Take some, Windex or whatever and a Q-tip and clean all that hair and junk off of it. And then I actually just took a little bit of Armor All, or you could use rubber conditioner of your choice if you don't like Armor All, and put it on a Q-tip and just sort of apply it to the dome, just to sort of condition that rubber a little bit. Although it's amazing how soft they've stayed over the years. I wish they'd used whatever they used on the cloth dome on the tinsel leads, because then we wouldn't have to fix them. But whatever. So now we're going to look at the actual voice coil. You need to flip it over to do this, and if you flip it over, it's going to be resting on the soft dome, so don't do that. I actually sort of would zip tie a little piece of foam or something onto one corner so that I could flip it over and it would be resting on that piece of foam and not on the dome. Anyway, get yourself a bright light, and if you're not, I'm super nearsighted, and so I can just take off my glasses and look really close at these things, or take out my contacts and look really close at these things. But if you're having trouble seeing up close, which I understand if you do, get yourself a magnifying glass and have a look. So the first one we're going to look at here is we're going to be unwinding a half turn of the voice coil from each side, and using that as our new tinsel wire. It's not going to really impact the way the driver works, and the DC resistance of the driver only drops a third of an ohm or something like that when you do this, and so it's not a big deal. So the first side you're going to look at is the side that has the former gap, and you're going to need your pin for this, and so we'll go to the next picture here. And so you can see that what I've done is I've just carefully slipped the pin in between the former and the bit of the coil that goes down to the lead that we've clipped off and we're not going to be using anymore. So what you need to do with this little lead, it may be hard to see, but you need to clip it with some wire cutters here, so you can see that I'm doing that in the picture. And then we need to carefully, with the pin, we're going to push it through the gap to the other side of the gap on the bottom, because that's where it actually needs to go. So you just take your pin and just very gently sort of prod it through there, and then get a pair of tweezers. I'm sorry, I should have said you needed tweezers in the beginning of the video. You need tweezers. And grab that little wire and gently pull it up, and it will come free. And then pull it up through the top of the gap here. And then it's just going to be the top winding. And so you'll just carefully tug on it and peel it off until you've gone all the way around to the other side of the former. And don't go too far on it, just go all the way to the other side where you're going to need to put the lead out again. And then the other side is even easier because it's already on the bottom, so you just put your needle through and clip it, and then pull it also around to the other side. The next step is putting it through the, we're going to put it through the surround of the dome, the sort of suspension, near the voice coil side. And so take your needle and push it gently through the dome from the front side. And then, so the dome is very pliable and sort of sticky. And if you push it through and then pull the needle out, the hole that you pushed through will actually very quickly close, and you won't be able to push the voice coil wire through. And so what I like to do is just keep the needle in there and sort of hold the mid-range sort of upright. And then as I'm removing the needle, I'm at the same time also sort of following it along with the voice coil wire. Do all of this very gently, because the voice coil wire, you could snap it if you yank on it too hard. So you can see here, now we have the voice coil wire. It's coming down across the voice coil, and going down to the surround and through the hole we put in there. Now take your toothpick and very gently sort of prod it in close to the voice coil, that lead that's coming down. Prod it sort of close and push it into the sort of the corner between the surround and the former, so that it fits in there nice and flush up against the side, because this all still needs to fit back into the magnet gap. And it totally does, but you just want to make sure that you're not adding too much thickness to the coil there. So just push it down there till it looks kind of flush. And this is where we're going to use our fingernail polish, or whatever it is you've got. Now you can see I've just added, I put on my toothpick just a dab. I didn't even use the applicator from the fingernail polish. It's too big, so I just took a little dab, a droplet even, of the fingernail polish, and I've just dabbed it onto the wire there, you can see, so that I've got a better picture here. Here we go. I've dabbed it on there just so that the wire is nice and adhered down the side of the coil and along the side of the former down to the surround. And then down at the surround, you need it to adhere to the surround where you pushed it through, but you need it to be nice and flexible. And so this is the first time you're going to use your liquid latex. Just take a little tiny sort of drop of that on the end of your fine paintbrush and just apply it around where the voice coil goes through the surround to just give it a nice anchor there. Here's another good picture of what it should look like on the inside. And so now it's all securely fastened. It's not going to rattle loose or anything like that if you push it through like that. So now we're back on top of the speaker. You can see the voice coil wire is now coming out, and there's our new lead. It's going through the surround, and what you want to do is, I've sort of skipped some steps here, but I'm going to explain to you what's happened. You don't push it through the, okay, so this, I should have explained this earlier. Clean out the channel that the old tinsel wire used to be in. Sort of scrape it out of there with a little screwdriver or whatever. Use your soldering iron to heat up the old solder point where the previous tinsel wire was, and use a solder sucker, which is another thing I forgot that I should tell you, you're probably going to want to have, to suck the solder out of the center of that thing right there. That way there's just a hole right through there. Then take the lead and give it a little sort of a loop right there where it meets in, so it has plenty of slack, so that the cone, the dome, can move up and down. Now it hardly moves at all, and you don't need much there, but just give it a little bit of a loop like the original had, and then sort of push it out onto the hold it with your finger until it's sort of laying flush flat on top of the housing, I guess, and then take your X-Acto knife and just only at the part where you can see it's going to be going through the hole where you're going to solder it. Now this is the tricky, gentle part. Now I would have loved to have done a video of this, but you know, you need both hands and I just couldn't get it to work. Take your X-Acto knife and very gently scrape off the enamel on that magnet wire. If you don't do that, it doesn't solder very well, and you're likely to fill up the solder joint there and then not have any conductivity later. And so you need to scrape off at least the lacquer on one side of that lead. So after you've done that, push it through the hole, and then after you've got it sort of pressed in there with you use your toothpick to sort of like position the wire in that channel, take a little bit of liquid latex on your toothpick and just dab it right there, and it'll begin to dry pretty quickly, and it'll just anchor it right in that spot where you can kind of see on this picture. And here's the next picture. It's sort of a close-up of what it's going to look like, your little loop right there. So next thing you do, now I didn't have a picture of this or a video of this either, obviously I haven't got any videos here, but you can see that what I've done is I've soldered the lead in there. And so what you want to do is take your paste flux and sort of liberally apply it to the inside there, and then take your soldering iron, and you want to make sure that the lead gets nice and hot, because the rest of that lacquer that's on the lead will actually sort of burn up and pull away so that the solder will solder nicely to the entire wire. And so put your soldering iron sort of right on that wire, and when things get nice and hot in there, start adding your solder, and you know, dwell on it a little bit longer than you think you might need to. Just, you don't want to melt the plastic or anything like that, but sort of dwell there and let it get nice and hot so that you're sure that your wire is nicely soldered there. Alright, do that for the other side as well. And then you should end up with something that looks like this. It's soldered on both sides. This is a good time to do a continuity check. So once you've soldered both sides, take your multimeter and just make sure it should read in the 7 to 7.5 ohms range is normal for this after you've done this. And if it's not reading there, then this is a good time to go back and reflow those solder joints until you get continuity there. Let's see. Next picture, you can kind of see. So next thing I've done here is I've added some liquid latex to the channels to get the wire to stay in there real nice, and to the point where it meets the dome surround there. And you want to do that. Here, I'm going to click to the next picture. So that it's nice and secure. And then what you do is you start adding, and I do this a little at a time. I don't try and glop it all in there. I'll take a little bit of the liquid latex and I'll coat the wire, and I'll let it dry, you know, for 10 minutes or something, and I'll come back and put another coat on it. And about 3 or 4 coats later, let's see, you end up with a nice coat on it, and it starts looking like this. And this is what you want. And it'll actually, this is still wet here in this picture, but it'll actually start turning that golden amber color that is weirdly sort of the original color of that beeswax stuff that they put on it. And so it actually ends up looking very original with a liquid latex. Looks very similar. So here's a picture. You can see I'm measuring the continuity, and I've got 7.5 ohms. And here is a picture of the completed tweeter, or I mean mid-range driver. Something I should have mentioned here is while you're applying layers of latex to your dome, you can also be reassembling it at this point. And this is a little bit fiddly, but what you want to do when you reassemble it is you place it back on the magnet block, and you can put 2 of the screws in and sort of tighten them up a little bit, but then you got to go to like a quiet room, and you got to press around, put your ear right up on it and press around on the edges of the dome, and if you hear any kind of rubbing noise, you got to loosen those 2 screws up and kind of shift that top plate around, and then tighten them down again, and then kind of press around on it, and eventually you'll find a spot. Now if you're having a lot of trouble finding a spot where it doesn't rub, take those 2 screws out, rotate it 90 degrees on the magnet, try again, because I've had to do that with a couple of these where there was one position where you just couldn't get it to not rub, but then if you turn it 9 degrees, then it would work fine. Also keep in mind that we've changed the polarity of this, so the polarity is backwards now. And I like to double check polarity anyway, because on some of these old Infinity speakers, I've pulled them apart and they've actually been labeled wrong. The drivers have positive and negative, and so this is a good opportunity after you get the thing reassembled to check polarity. And the best way to do this is to get a couple of leads and attach them to your driver, and then take a battery, like a little 1.5 volt AA, and if you have the positive terminal of the battery connected to the positive terminal of a driver, when you connect it, the driver will move away from the magnet. And if you've got it connected opposite, it'll move toward the magnet a little bit. And so it's really easy to check the absolute polarity of a woofer or a mid-range. It's hard to do it with tweeters because tweeters don't move very much. But with a mid-range and a woofer, you can really tell the absolute polarity of the driver with a battery. And so at that point, I just remark the positive of the driver, make sure it's not rubbing, put all the screws back in, and then you just let the latex dry, and you're done. And I've done this on about, I don't know, 10 drivers or something like that, and it's all worked really well. And I've used liquid latex for about 20 years on various things, and even the things that I have around that I originally used this stuff on, the latex is still super soft and pliable. So I don't think that it hardens up over time, which is perfect for this application. You want it to stay soft. So that's it. I noticed there wasn't another video about how to repair these drivers on YouTube, and so I thought this would help somebody. So I hope it's helped you, and good luck with your repair. And let's keep these old speakers alive because they're cool. And thanks for watching my video.